Hey guys. So this is an extension of the last one. We talked about Deming's 14 points, which were on the positive side, and now we're going to Deming highlights 7 deadly diseases in an organization. Remember, this still goes with the homework assignment, so 3 elements will be chosen, 3 examples for homework, 6, will be chosen from the previous lecture, and then 3 will be chosen from this lecture. So you have to fill out that table. You have to, hold yourself to a date prior to the due date of the assignment to make your choice. Once you've made your choice, then you're able to do the work necessary to complete the assignment, which will be due at the ultimate due date. So again, trying to train us to adopt interim due dates to keep our work on flow, and that is so we meet our eventual due dates. Right, Penelope? So, consequences of organizations where diseases go uncured, which is a strange way to put it. I mean, if these diseases are allowed to remain within an organization, then transformation is likely impossible. Right? So now we may be hiring consultants in these organizations, paying lip service to change, and it really kind of amounts to what some people at the paper mill called the flavor of the month. And that is every 2 years you see a cycle of change promoted, which is not supported. It's usually some manager is trying to get a promotion, so they institute this program, they get their promotion, the program's forgotten, and everyone gets pissed off and demotivated and a little more frustrated than they were the year before, and that's usually kind of the outcome. Managers at Boise Cascade were told by the president, George Herod, that when it comes to transformation, you can lead, you can follow, or you can get the hell out of the way. Now, Herod didn't think this up. He stole it from Lee Iacocca of Chrysler Corporation. But really, it is kind of the way it goes down. When you want to make transformation part of an organization, here's what you can expect. About 10% are going to say, yeah, I love this shit, I'm going to lead the change, right? You got about 80% of the people are going to say, I don't know, let's see how it goes. We'll just see how it goes and see what happens, right? And then finally, you got 10% who are going to resist change at all costs. So lead, follow, get the hell out of the way. That is, identify your leaders, empower them, train your workers, the 80% that are going to follow. And then finally, there's some people that are just going to have to go. Some people are not going to play ball with the situation, right? So, lack of constancy of purpose. Remember, constancy of purpose was mentioned before. What do we know? Well, the lack of constancy of purpose is to plan product and service that will have market and keep the company in business, provide job. So if we're not sure what we're about, if we're not sure how to implement what we're about, then the company is going to die, and all those people who are depending on the company for their jobs are going to suffer. Right? The emphasis on short-term profits, short-term thinking, just the opposite of constancy purpose to stay in business, right? Is fed by fear of unfriendly takeover, push from bankers and owners for dividends. And one of the things when we talked about vision statements, this is one of the things that troubled me about Boise Cascade, when they said, first and foremost, their responsibility is to the shareholders. And that institutes then a level of fear. The moment that shareholders who sit in their room and monitor, stock tickers, etc., say, oh my God, something doesn't look good here, then they bail on the company and the company loses value. This system then doesn't produce long-term value or job security, and that's unfortunate at best, right? We might argue with Ohio State, who's got a surplus of like $7 billion or some insane amount off on this most recent cost-cutting venture. It probably represents short-term thinking, although I probably don't know enough to say that with any kind of authority. Evaluation of performance, merit rating, or annual review is devastating to people. It produces those artificial numbers, those artificial quotas, and it scares people that they might get bad ratings. There are more effective ways to develop rating systems, and we're going to talk about those later in the course. We'll also talk about those in personnel psychology, which is offered in the spring. Mobility. A lot of people now, they've got exceedingly short-term thinking or an exceedingly short-term approach to their work. So they're always sniffing for a better offer, right? And notice this is a very kind of selfish, narcissistic, individualistic, kind of climbing the ladder type philosophy. It's encouraged by most businesses, and you have companies that do this, the headhunting companies, etc. To the extent that we can return to a greater level of loyalty, and that is offer people past promotion, right? They're more likely to stick around, and then if they're more likely to stick around, we're better, and we have more demonstrable loyalty within an organization, and we form better long-term relationships within the organization. So mobility is a real killer in this respect, right? Visible figures. Management by use of only visible figures, so those quotas, the numbers, etc., with little or no consideration that the figures of the figures that are unknown or unknowable. And a lot of times when we look at causal mechanisms, they're hidden relatively deep. So those numbers that represent or provide evidence around causal mechanisms are largely unknown in a lot of organizations because people don't necessarily explore them. This is a big one, and I don't know how this is going to be changed in the near future. But notice, out of the crisis, this is 1986, this book was written. And Deming is saying, look, these excessive medical costs are going to just literally break the bank, right? Executives shared with him that the cost of medical care for their employees amongst their largest overall expense, right? Not to mention the cost of medical care embedded in the purchase price of what they purchase from their suppliers. When an employer absorbs a cost, that cost eventually somehow has to show up in the product. So when we have all these layers of medical expense, right, it's just inflating the cost of the product. Now, a lot of companies have kind of responded to this by pushing increasing amounts of responsibility for this cost onto the worker themselves. So we see that health insurance benefits seem to get a little smaller every year, and our contribution as employees tends to get a little bigger every year. But the systemic problem, and we're not going to point to this boss or that boss. What we're talking about is the medical system as it operates in this country. Seems to be largely profit driven, and I don't know how you feel about that. That's not the point. But as long as it is, and people are trying to make greater and greater profits within the medical industry, then someone's got to pay for it, and it's going to be the worker, and it's often a problem with the company. So how we approach this and how we solve this problem becomes a political dilemma, that's been fighting, that we've been fighting for years now. Who knows how it's going to shake out? And then the other one that Deming, talked about in terms of talking with management and organizations is the excessive cost of liability swelled by lawyers that work on contingency fees. And to what extent does someone want to take on that system? Let's face it, sometimes people get injured, and it's a horrible thing to get injured, and people should legitimately be compensated for their injuries when someone else is responsible. But what is the level and the nature of the compensation? And that's something that we have to visit. We have to look at that system for compensating. It's funny, when I was growing up, I remember, I was in grade school, I was at Sylvan Park, and somehow I came across some insurance information, and basically it stated, this insurance policy pays you $25,000 for an eye. I'm making up the numbers now, but so if you lose an eye, it's $25,000, right? If you lose both eyes, it's $60,000. If you lose an arm, $20,000. You lose both arms, then the policy pays off, $75,000 or whatever. But notice that the cost of an injury was standardized. So it's not like a lawyer could say, wow, I think I could get a couple million for this in court. It was worth what it was worth. But now lawyers operate on contingencies, and they say, I'll take your case because I think you got a good case, and I'm going to take 40%. And that then encourages them to get as much as they can, because that then increases what 40% means to them. Is it a workable system? again, maybe that's too political for me to go there, but consider it that these processes, these systems do have consequences, and these consequences can be devastating for companies and therefore devastating for the worker, and ultimately then devastating for the communities in which that organization is embedded and the people who work for the organization are embedded. The last two, tough ones to take care of. Certainly though, they could be points within your homework assignment if you want to go there. That's up to you. So that's it. So thanks.